She heard it the moment she crossed the threshold, the silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that echoes off marble floors and cathedral ceilings and reminds you that a house, no matter how vast, is still empty without the right person in it. Cathy Kleen stood at the top of the curved staircase of the Carter estate, 32 floors above the glittering sprawl of Charleston, South Carolina, and she breathed in the quiet like a woman who had learned to survive on very little. She was striking, dark-skinned, tall, with a kind of elegance that turned rooms quiet. Her natural hair was pinned up tonight, a few loose coils framing her jaw. She wore a charcoal wrap dress that hugged her figure without demanding attention. She had learned, after 3 years in this world, how to exist beautifully without needing to perform. Her husband, Buddy Carter, was not home. He was never home. The text came at 6:42 p.m., delivered through his assistant, Mr. Carter, held in Atlanta. Board vote ran long. Do not wait dinner. No apology. No warmth. Just logistics. Cathy set her phone face down on the kitchen island and poured herself a glass of burgundy. She carried it to the floor-to-ceiling window and stared out at the city, glittering, indifferent, alive. Buddy Carter was a titan. A self-made billionaire who had built Apex Meridian Holdings from a single failing tech firm in his mid-20s into a global empire spanning finance, energy, and real estate. Forbes called him relentless. Business Weekly called him visionary. Cathy called him absent. She had loved him first, loved the man behind the ambition. The one who used to drive to her apartment at midnight just to bring her soup when she was sick. The one who cried at the end of old films and pretended he hadn't. That man still existed somewhere beneath the empire. She just couldn't find him anymore. She had stopped waiting at the dinner table 2 months ago. Tonight, she sat alone on the window seat, feet tucked beneath her, wine in hand, watching the city breathe. She was the wife of a billionaire. She had everything. And somehow, she had never felt more invisible. He arrived on a Thursday afternoon with a duffel bag, a broken guitar strap, and absolutely no warning. Cathy was in the sunroom sketching rough watercolor studies when she heard the front door open. Her pulse jumped. Buddy never came home at 2 p.m. Buddy never came home before dark. But when she stepped into the foyer, it wasn't Buddy standing there. It was his mirror image. Ruddy Carter leaned against the doorframe with a sheepish grin, his dark hair longer than his brother's, his jaw unshaven, wearing a flannel shirt untucked over worn jeans. He looked like what Buddy might have looked like if ambition hadn't ironed all the softness out of him. "Cathy Kleen Carter," Ruddy said, like he was tasting the name. "God, you're even more beautiful in person." "Ruddy." She blinked. "Buddy didn't tell me you were coming." He spread his arms. "Buddy doesn't know. Which I'm guessing will go over great." Ruddy Carter was the twin who had walked away. Where Buddy built empires, Ruddy had built himself. Traveling, painting, spending 3 years in a remote art residency in New Mexico, another 2 sailing the Gulf of Mexico on a boat named after you. He sent postcards instead of emails. He laughed at funerals and cried at street music. He was everything Apex Meridian wasn't, unpolished, present, and free. Cathy had met him once before, briefly, at their wedding. He had danced with her grandmother and made her laugh until she snorted champagne. Buddy had watched from across the room with a tight, complex smile. "You can take the East Wing," Cathy said, stepping back to let him in. "Buddy will be back. Sometime." Ruddy nodded, reading the quiet weight in those 2 words. He didn't press. He just picked up his bag and followed her inside, and for one brief second, the house felt fractionally less empty. Buddy came home Friday night. He kissed Cathy on the cheek, clapped Ruddy on the shoulder, and disappeared into his private study within 11 minutes. Ruddy sat across from Cathy at the kitchen island and watched her eyes follow her husband down the hallway until the study door clicked shut. He didn't say anything. He just poured her more coffee. That small act, wordless, thoughtful, immediate, lodged itself somewhere in her chest. Over the next week, a quiet rhythm established itself. Buddy was a tornado that moved through the estate at impossible speed. Early morning calls, back-to-back flights, dinners with investors he'd forgotten to mention. He moved through the rooms like a man passing through a hotel. Ruddy, meanwhile, was everywhere Buddy wasn't. He woke before dawn and made coffee the old way. French press, coarsely ground, left to steep for exactly 4 minutes. By the time Cathy came downstairs, there was always a mug waiting for her, set at the exact corner of the kitchen island where the morning light hit. "How do you know where I sit?" she asked one morning. He looked up from his sketchbook. "You always walk toward the light." She didn't know what to say to that. She sat down and wrapped both hands around the mug and watched steam curl up between them. They talked. At first, cautiously, about his art, her charity work with the Clearwater Foundation, the funny disasters of her early career as a non-profit director. Then, less cautiously, about her childhood in Savannah. About the grandmother who raised her. About what she had wanted her life to look like before she became Buddy Carter's wife. "And what did you want?" Ruddy asked one morning, voice low. She thought for a moment. "To be known. Not photographed. Not displayed. Just known." Ruddy nodded like he'd been waiting for that answer his entire life. It was Buddy's idea, which made it worse. Apex Meridian had recently acquired a stretch of vineyards in the Blue Ridge foothills, a legacy acquisition that came bundled with a struggling winery called Thornfield Press. Buddy needed someone to go inspect the property before the quarterly review, and since he had 3 board meetings and a flight to Dubai, he sent Ruddy. "Take Cathy," he said, already scrolling through his phone. "She knows how to talk to people." He said it like she was a resource, a tool, an asset in his portfolio of assets. Cathy kept her face still and agreed. The drive to the foothills took 2 hours. Ruddy drove with the windows down, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping against the door to whatever was playing softly on the radio. He was comfortable in silence. He didn't fill every gap with noise, which Cathy found both unusual and deeply restful. Halfway through, the skies opened and rain blurred the road into silver. Before we dive deeper into this story, let's see how global we are. Comment where you're watching from and your favorite part of the story. Hit like if you enjoy billionaire love stories. Subscribe if you're ready for more drama and romance. This isn't just a channel, it's a boredom pill. Now, let's continue this incredible story. Ruddy pulled off at a small roadside diner called Hatch and Ember, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu and the smell of cinnamon rolls fresh from the oven. They sat at a corner table and ordered hot drinks and pie. Outside, the rain fell in thick sheets. "I can't remember the last time I stopped for pie," Cathy said. "Buddy doesn't believe in stopping," Ruddy said, not unkindly. "He believes in arrival." She smiled faintly. "Not the journey." Ruddy watched her. "What do you believe in?" The question sat between them, simple and devastating. Cathy looked at the rain. "I believe in being known. In sitting still long enough that someone can actually see you." She paused. "I haven't done that in a long time." On the drive back, the sun came out. Gold spread across the dashboard. Cathy caught herself watching the curve of Ruddy's jaw, the faint scar near his left temple, the easy way his hands rested on the steering wheel. He looked so much like Buddy. And yet, "Do you envy him?" she asked quietly. Ruddy was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes." He glanced over. "Not for the money." She didn't ask what for. She already knew. Cathy had forgotten what it felt like to be noticed. Not photographed. Not admired from a distance the way powerful men admire beautiful things they own. but genuinely, quietly, specifically noticed. Ruddy noticed everything. He noticed when she changed her hair, when she let it out of the pin and wore it in a crown of coils on a Tuesday morning. He said nothing, just smiled at his sketchbook like it was a private thing. He noticed her favorite tea was rooibos with cardamom, and he ordered a supply without mentioning it. One morning it simply appeared in the cabinet. He noticed when she was pretending to be fine. He had a way of sitting nearby without crowding her, present but not intrusive, like the warm pressure of a hand without the actual touch. Meanwhile, Buddy sent her calendar invites for their shared obligations. He communicated through his assistant on Thursdays. He had not asked about her dreams since before the wedding. One afternoon, at a Clearwater Foundation fundraiser in the Savannah district, Cathy delivered a speech about underserved communities and access to education. Ruddy was there. Buddy was in Singapore. When she stepped down from the podium, Ruddy was waiting at the edge of the crowd. "That was extraordinary," he said. She shrugged with practiced modesty. "It's just a speech." "No." He shook his head. "The way you said it. Like you actually mean every word. Like you built this from something real." He paused. "Did you?" She held his gaze. "My grandmother couldn't read until she was 45. A church volunteer taught her." Ruddy was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know that." "Buddy doesn't either," she said softly. The weight of that sentence settled between them. She hadn't meant it as an accusation. It was simply the truth, and the truth was beginning to cost her more than she'd bargained for. The storm rolled in off the coast on a Wednesday night. Buddy was in New York. He'd texted at 9 p.m., an emergency acquisition. He'd be back by the weekend, maybe. She didn't reply. Cathy stood on the estate's upper balcony wrapped in a cashmere blanket, watching lightning fracture the dark sky over the harbor. Rain hit the stone railing and exploded into mist around her. She knew she should go inside. She stayed anyway. "You'll get pneumonia." She turned. Ruddy stood in the balcony doorway holding his own jacket, hair already damp from the overspray. "Probably," she said. He stepped out and settled beside her, not too close, and draped his jacket across her shoulders over the blanket. He said nothing about why she was standing in the rain. He simply stood beside her. A long silence. Thunder rolled. The harbor below was wild and ink-black. "You shouldn't be the one standing out here with me," she said quietly. Ruddy turned to look at her. A flash of lightning illuminated both their faces for one stark, honest second. "Why does it feel like I should be, then?" Her breath caught. The air between them shifted. It was brief, a single suspended moment where everything that had been building for weeks reached the surface and almost broke through. Ruddy stepped back. One deliberate, painful step. He gripped the railing. "I'm going to make tea," he said. She nodded. He went inside. She stood there for another 5 minutes, trembling. Not from the cold. Later, lying alone in the king-sized bed with rain battering the windows, Cathy stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about the man down the hall, the one who stepped back. The one who stayed anyway. The one who, somehow, made stepping back feel like the bravest and most devastating thing she had ever witnessed. He said he was leaving on a Monday. "I think some distance would be good," Ruddy told her over coffee. He didn't meet her eyes. "For everyone." "Is that what you actually think?" she asked. He was quiet for a long beat. "It's what I know is right." She swallowed. "Okay." Buddy saw him off with a handshake and a call he had to take immediately after. Ruddy's hand brushed Cathy's as he passed. Accidental, fleeting, charged. She felt it long after his car turned out of the gate. The estate grew quieter. Colder. Buddy continued his orbit, present for 3 days, then gone for 10. Cathy immersed herself in work at the Clearwater Foundation. She avoided the sunroom, the pier, the kitchen corner, everywhere that had become, quietly, his. Then, 2 weeks after Ruddy left, she found the letter. It was folded inside an art catalog he'd left on the study bookshelf. She hadn't meant to open it. She'd pulled the catalog out looking for a title he'd mentioned once. The letter fell into her hands like it had been waiting. It was handwritten, the ink slightly smudged at the margins. Cathy, you said once that you missed being known. I want you to know that I see you. I saw you from the first morning you walked into that kitchen and held that coffee mug like it was the only warm thing in a cold house. Maybe that's my curse, seeing what was never mine to see. If I could reorder time, I'd have found you first, in some other life where nothing was complicated. I'm sorry I stayed as long as I did. I'm sorrier that I didn't stay longer. She sat on the study floor and held the letter against her chest and cried. Not from guilt. From grief. The grief of something that was real, and could never be anything. That night, Buddy came home, noticed her red eyes, and asked if she had a cold. Yes, she said. Something like that. Ruddy came back. He sent no message. He appeared on a Tuesday evening, standing in the kitchen doorway looking like a man who had driven 14 hours without deciding to stop. He was thinner. His eyes had that worn, sleepless quality of someone who had been fighting himself and losing. I thought going away would help, he said. Did it? She asked. No. She let him in. She made tea. They sat at the kitchen island and talked until midnight. Carefully. About art. About silence. About the things people carry that no one ever sees. They laughed once, sharply, at something ridiculous Ruddy said about a gas station in Memphis. It was a real laugh, unguarded, the kind that splits open walls you didn't know you'd built. You're different when you laugh like that, Ruddy said. Like what? Like someone who forgot she was performing. She was about to answer when she heard it, the front door. Buddy stepped into the kitchen and stopped. She was barefoot, still in his old university shirt she'd borrowed 2 years ago and never returned. Ruddy was on the stool across from her, relaxed and warm in the low light. Flour, they'd started making something, abandoned it halfway through, dusted her hands. Buddy's eyes moved from her face to Ruddy's. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. His Atlanta meeting had been cancelled, he said flatly, like he was narrating his own life from a distance. Daniel, she started. Don't, he said. His voice was so quiet, so controlled. That was the most frightening thing. How quiet it was. Just don't. He turned and walked upstairs. She heard the bedroom door close. Ruddy looked at her across the island. No words. Just the understanding that the thing they'd been trying to hold at arm's length had just walked through the door and seen itself clearly. For 3 days, Buddy didn't speak to her. He was present. She could hear him, see him crossing rooms, pouring coffee, but he had erected a wall so impenetrable it had its own gravity. She felt herself pulling against it just by being in the same house. On the 4th night, she walked into the study. He was standing at the window, his reflection carved in the glass against the dark city below. He didn't turn. We need to talk, she said. Do we? Not a question. Yes. A long pause. Then he turned. His eyes were the color of something burned. Tell me the truth, Cathy. Are you in love with my brother? The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. She counted them. I tried not to be. Something crossed his face. Not rage. Worse. A slow, devastating understanding. How long? Nothing happened, Buddy. Nothing physical. I need you to hear that. I heard you say you tried not to be. His voice cracked at the edge. That means you are. She wrapped her arms around herself. You left me alone for 3 years. You left me alone in a house that could hold 100 people, and I was the only one in it, night after night, and you sent your assistant to tell me you wouldn't make dinner again. You never asked what I needed. You never asked how I felt. You just assumed that the house and the name and the card was enough. I built this for you. His voice finally broke, the control shattering. Everything, all of it, for you. I didn't want a kingdom, buddy. She was crying now, quietly. I wanted a husband. The silence after that was immense. Outside, the harbor was dark and still. Inside, 2 people stood in the ruins of something they had both built and both neglected. Then Ruddy appeared in the doorway. Buddy moved before anyone could stop him. The punch was fast. Buddy crossed the room in 3 strides, and his fist connected with Ruddy's jaw before Ruddy could speak a single word. Ruddy hit the doorframe and slid back against the wall. He didn't fall. He steadied himself, one hand against the wood, and spat blood. He didn't raise his hands. Buddy, stop. Cathy stepped between them. Don't. Buddy's voice was a controlled detonation. He pointed at Ruddy. You. My house. My wife. Ruddy looked at him, really looked, the way only a twin can, reading decades in a single glance. Yes, he said. And I'm sorry. More than you'll ever know. Sorry. Buddy laughed. Hollow. That's what you've got. I didn't plan this. Ruddy's voice was steady despite the blood on his lip. I didn't come here to steal from you. But you left her, Buddy. You left her in that house, and the lights were off, and she was disappearing, and you didn't notice. Buddy lunged. This time Ruddy caught him, not to fight, but to hold. Like the way twins hold each other in the dark when they're boys. Both of them shaking. Both of them breaking. You left her, Ruddy said, voice raw. That's not something I did to you. That's something you did to her. Buddy let go. He stepped back. He looked at his brother's face, his own face, split and bleeding, and something collapsed inside him. Cathy stood between them, trembling. She was not crying anymore. She was something past crying. Get out, Buddy said. His voice had gone flat. Get out of my house, Ruddy. Ruddy wiped his mouth. He looked at Cathy. One long, wordless look that held everything. An entire language without a single word. Then he walked to the door, picked up his bag, and left. The door closed. The house went still. Buddy stood in the center of the study, chest heaving. The empire he had built over 15 years felt, in that moment, like absolutely nothing. The story broke on Friday. No one ever found out who leaked it. A driver, a housekeeper, a disgruntled investor who'd spotted Ruddy leaving the estate at 3 a.m. It didn't matter. By Saturday morning, the headline existed in 12 languages. Apex Meridian CEO Buddy Carter. Twin brother, wife, and the affair that could sink an empire. Buddy read it in his penthouse office with black coffee going cold in his hand. He set the cup down. He did not speak for 11 minutes. Then he called his legal team. The board meeting was Monday. Buddy walked in wearing the kind of suit that meant he hadn't slept. The CFO, a meticulous man named Garfield Strand, cleared his throat twice before speaking. The stock dropped 9 points at open, Buddy. Partners in the Gulf sector are pulling back. The Drexford merger is now in question. It'll hold, Buddy said. The optics. I said it'll hold. His voice was the flat, dead calm of a man functioning entirely on control and nothing else. It didn't hold. By Wednesday, Apex Meridian had lost 11% of its market value. 3 senior investors had publicly called for a restructuring review. Someone had tipped off a financial journalist about the fragility of the Drexford deal. Buddy sat in his glass office above the Charleston skyline and watched his empire, which he had constructed over 15 years of relentless sacrifice, shudder. His oldest friend and right hand, a man named Perry Voss, came in that evening with a bottle of aged bourbon and the kind of face men wear when they're about to say something true. "You want to know what I think?" Perry said. "Not really. You built the most impressive empire I've ever seen." Perry poured 2 glasses. "And you forgot to build a home." Buddy stared at the skyline. He didn't deny it. Cathy moved out on a Thursday. She didn't take much. A suitcase, her grandmother's quilt, the small framed watercolor she'd finished herself during one of the long empty evenings. She moved into a rented townhouse in the Elliott Borough district. Quiet streets, wrought iron gates, the smell of jasmine from the neighbor's fence. No ocean view. No marble. Just walls. The press camped outside for a week. She smiled when she had to and said nothing. She was very good at saying nothing. The Clearwater Foundation Board had offered her a temporary leave of absence. She declined it. Work was the one thing that still felt like solid ground. Meanwhile, Ruddy had disappeared again. She didn't reach out. She told herself it was the right choice. She lay awake at 2 a.m. most nights and argued with herself about it until the argument ran out of steam and left her staring at the ceiling in the dark. Then one night, 11 days after she'd moved out, her doorbell rang at 10 p.m. Ruddy. Rain-soaked, shadows under his eyes, wearing the same flannel shirt he'd had on the first day he arrived at the estate. He looked like a man who had driven a long distance without a destination. "I thought going away would quiet it," he said. "Ruddy. It doesn't quiet. It follows." His voice was low. "You follow." She stepped back. He came inside. They sat across from each other in her small, undecorated living room, and she didn't offer him anything because she didn't have the energy for pretense. "I can't keep doing this," he said finally. "Not like this. Not in his shadow. Not with this much guilt living in my chest. Do you think I don't feel it?" She pressed her hand to her sternum. "Every time I look at you, I see his face. I hate myself for not being able to stop." Ruddy's voice broke. "Then why does it still feel like this was always supposed to happen?" She had no answer. Neither did he. They sat in the silence and let it be. Buddy called them both. One message, 2 recipients, no explanation, estate. Saturday, 8 p.m. "We end this." Cathy arrived first, stepping through the grand doors into the house that had once been her home. It smelled the same, cedar and sea air. She stood in the foyer and tried not to feel the grief of it. Ruddy came minutes later. They acknowledged each other with a look that said everything and then stood on opposite sides of the room and waited. Buddy arrived last. No suit. A simple dark shirt, jeans, no watch. He looked like the man he might have been if life had bent differently. He looked exhausted and real and, for the first time in years, present. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to understand." He looked at Ruddy. "When?" Ruddy didn't flinch. "Longer than I should have let it go. But never the way you imagine." He paused. "She was alone, Buddy. You left her alone for years and called it building a future for her." Buddy's jaw moved. He turned to Cathy. "You never told me you were unhappy." "I told you 1,000 times," she said. "In every quiet dinner. In every unanswered text. In every night I went to sleep in a bed you'd already forgotten to come home to. She held his gaze. You only hear what fits your narrative, buddy. I was never in your narrative. The silence stretched. Outside, the harbor was a dark mirror. Buddy sat down on the edge of the couch like a man whose knees had finally given way. He put his face in his hands. When he looked up, something in him had cracked open. I thought love was something you could put in a vault and come back to, he said. I thought it would wait. No one replied. They didn't need to. The truth was already in the room. I hate what happened, Buddy said finally. He looked at his brother. And I hate that I understand it. After Buddy spoke, Ruddy turned to Cathy. I love you, he said. It cost him everything to say it in this room, in front of this man. But what we have isn't built on clean ground. And I don't want to be something you carry as shame. Cathy looked at him. Her eyes were steady, even as tears traced her cheeks. You're not, she whispered. But that doesn't make it right. Buddy rose from the couch. He looked at her with the kind of exhausted clarity that only comes after the fight is gone. I failed you. I know that now. I spent 3 years building a life for you and forgot to actually be in it. Yes. I would have done anything to fix it. If you'd just... I couldn't make you see what you didn't want to see, Buddy. Her voice was gentle. Not angry anymore. That's not my job. It never was. She stood very still for a long moment. Then she reached up and unclasped the diamond pendant she wore, a piece from their first anniversary, worth more than most people's cars. She held it for a moment, then set it on the glass coffee table between them. It landed with a small, final sound. She slid her ring off next, placed it beside the pendant. I can't be the prize between brothers, she said. I won't choose between you, because choosing one of you breaks the other, and I am done breaking people. I am done being broken. Buddy stared at the ring. Ruddy looked at his hands. I'm walking away from both of you, Cathy said. Not in anger. Not in hate. But because I spent 3 years invisible in this house, and I need to find out who I am when nobody's watching. She took a breath. Thank you, Buddy, for the life you tried to give me. I know it was real. She looked at Ruddy. And thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Then she picked up her coat. And she walked out. 6 months passed. The tabloids eventually found someone else to destroy. Apex Meridian stock recovered, slowly, the way empires do, not through spectacle but through the patient work of people who had always believed in it more than its founder. Buddy returned to the company not as the untouchable titan, but as something quieter and more useful, a man who had learned, finally, to be in a room. He started arriving at meetings early. He remembered his assistants' names, their actual names, not just their titles. He took 3 days off in October for the first time in 6 years and spent them at a fishing cabin in the Smokies with Perry Voss, talking about nothing important, which turned out to be more important than any deal he'd ever closed. He didn't get Cathy back. He didn't try to. What he got instead was himself, a version of himself he hadn't seen since before the first billion. Ruddy went to Portugal. He rented a small studio above a bakery in a fishing village outside Porto and painted for 8 months straight. His first gallery show was scheduled for the spring. Nothing grand, just 30 pieces in a whitewashed room above the harbor. He called it, What I Kept. He never explained the title in interviews. He didn't need to. He thought about Cathy often. He thought about his brother. He had written Buddy a letter, handwritten, 3 pages, and received a single line back. I know. Me too. It was enough. They were still brothers. Broken and mended in the way that only loss can mend. And Cathy. Cathy planted a garden. In the small yard behind her Elliottboro townhouse, she dug beds in the spring and put in tomatoes and lavender and the climbing roses her grandmother had always grown. She cooked her own dinners. She ran the Clearwater Foundation with a ferocity that drew national attention. She laughed at things without checking to see if anyone else was laughing. One morning in April, blue sky, coffee warm, the garden beginning to bloom, she opened her journal to a fresh page and wrote, "Love is not always about who you end up with. Sometimes it's about who you become after the storm, and whether you're brave enough to like her." She read it back. She smiled. She was. Hello lovers and billionaires. We have come to the end of today's story. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think about today's story and where you're watching from. I read every comment. Please be kind to subscribe to the channel. Until the next story, stay in love and leave billionaire level.